Hello everybody, welcome to this week's edition of a late night screen review. This week we're talking about Lisa Frankenstein. It's really hot in this mask.
I talked to him. I wish I was with you. That's really weird, Lisa.
So yeah, here it is, guys. Sorry for the kind of lateness of this late night screen review. Also, it seems like a long time since we've done one of these, but there's just been nothing out there in the cinema. Just kind of FYI for the future, if in the future there's going to be another month where there's very little in terms of horror cinema, we are going to come up with a couple of different ideas, some shorter video releases, so we can kind of get more than, say, two late night screams a month, so we get at least 4 videos out a month. So there are plans in the future pipelines to kind of make kind of fill the gaps with additional video content. That's just for future reference. But anyway, on with the review. So Lisa Frankenstein is out in all kind of major cineplexes now in the UK, and is directed by I think first time director Zelda Williams. So there you go. Yeah. What's the story? Morning Glory. So Catherine Newton plays the titular Lisa Frankenstein, although Frankenstein isn't actually her last name, although off the top of my head I can't remember what last name is now, but there you go. Regardless, Lisa is a kind of down and out teenager. She's living with her new stepmom. Her dad is remarried recently after her mother was brutally murdered by an axe murderer, and she's now kind of living in this new house with her new stepmother, who's evil, and her stepsister, who's actually really nice. They're living in this new suburban home in the 1980s, and she's a misunderstood outsider, misfit type character who's just struggling to get on with life and is just trying to find her way. She ends up getting into some sort of semi-romantic relationship with a reanimated Victorian corpse. And, hilarity ensues. Something like that. We belong dead. Sorry. What did I think of the movie? Well, I've got to tell you, Lisa Frankenstein was a kind of a surprise for me. I didn't know anything about it. I think I saw as it usually goes at the minute with me, I only really saw the trailer, a showing of another film. I think I went to see Baghead, and it was a trailer there. It had this really cool stylistic look about it, or a really funky soundtrack. It looked very quirky, very, very vibrant, very animated, very comic book. And it looked like a kind of stereotypical kind of teenage horror themed kind of movie, something that I had not really much interest in. In fact, if it didn't have the title of Frankenstein in it, I probably wouldn't have given it a second glance. But I'm happy to say that I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed this movie. I actually thought a lot of this film. So it's the way I describe this movie to people is if you take Beetlejuice and Little Shop of Horrors and you combine those two movies together, you get Lisa Frankenstein, obviously with a touch of Frankenstein story plotline. It reminded me a lot of those late 80s to early 90s kind of, I don't know, those kind of light-hearted coming-of-age movies that happens to have a monster involved. I can't remember the name of the film now, but I always remember from a kid I watched a movie where it was an American film set in the 90s where 2 teenage boys accidentally discover the body of Frankenstein and reanimate him, and he comes back in the modern age, and he has to kind of adapt. The Frankenstein monster has to adapt to the modern age, or the modern age in the 90s, and it's just a big kind of laugh out loud riot. This film is kind of in that same vein. It's very like A Fish Out of Water, The Outsiders, the kind of person going through coming of age, going through their teenage years, going through college and trying to discover who they are and experience everything they can experience out of life. But then, with something thrown into the mix, a la a universal monster. And this is kind of no exception. This film also reminds me a lot of Hocus Pocus. If you took the zombie character of Billy and then made it a romantic story with a sort of teenage college-aged girl. This is Lisa Frankenstein. Now, that either sounds really good to you or it sounds really terrible. But for me, it was that kind of film. It kind of reminded me of all those kind of films. As I say, like Beetlejuice meets Little Shop of Horrors. It's really that kind of story. And for me, it was really refreshing to see this kind of a film at the cinema. And I've not seen a film like this probably since the 90s, which kind of tells you how old I am, but regardless. But like in terms of the direction and the story and the way it's told, it's done with a very quirky, I hate to use that word, but I think it fits really well here. It's done with a very quirky style. There's animated sequences. There's lots of bold, brash colours. Lisa's walking through a graveyard at the beginning of the film, and there's lots of reds blasting through the cemetery and blues shooting through the trees. There's a lightning sequence that reanimates the kind of corpse, and that's like a bright green lightning, and so it invokes all that kind of fun, cheesy kind of horror tropes, but you know, in a kind of semi-realistic kind of, but kind of amped up reality. It reminded me a lot also in terms of style of Edward Scissorhands, that kind of suburban neighbourhood, but then there's this really quirky, weird outsider character that comes in. This film takes a lot of those kinds of themes and mushes them all together. But again, it does it in a very stylish way. It's a very kind of quirky, dry humour. There's lots of sequences where characters are talking, and then there's a kind of dropped joke that kind of just is left to hang for what seems like minutes, but it's really just seconds. But you can either laugh along with that or just find it incredibly awkward, but the film just kind of rides with it. It's like very comic booky, very sent up reality. You might think it's almost like a dream by the main character. You know, she's a misfit, she's an outsider, nobody likes her, but then a reanimated corpse walks into her life, and it's them kind of going on an adventure together and her discovering kind of who she is through the means of forming a relationship with this reanimated corpse from the Victorian era. The animated corpse is played by a guy called Cole Sprouse. He has very little lines in the movie because he's literally a reanimated corpse with bits missing. He doesn't have a tongue, he doesn't have an ear and a hand, and also other things. We'll get to that. And Lisa kind of goes on this almost like this killing spree to find his body parts for him so they can be together. So again, it is a love story, but in a very dark kind of black comedy kind of sense. Again, I just rode this film like a pony. I really, really enjoyed it. I think the comedy is going to put some people off. Like I say, it's kind of offbeat comedy, quite quirky. It's very like strange and stylized in terms of its kind of, you know, in terms of kind of where it's kind of trying to go thematically. It kind of jumps around a little bit, but there are twists and turns, and at one point you think it is just going to be a very light-hearted comedy, but then about halfway through the film it takes a very dark turn, and they are, you know, it could be seen as an allegory for, you know, two lovers that get together and go on a killing spree. But there's loads of different things you can point out from this film. You know, at one point you think it's the monster that's leading the girl, or is the girl leading the monster down this dark path, and which one is it? And it kind of goes back and forth. So it's really interesting. Also, like, you have a very stereotypical stepmom who's just evil and wants to send the child off to the insane asylum to, you know, to get her out of her hair kind of thing, because you know, this outsider stepdaughter is messing with her overall plan of perfection and perfect life in suburbia. You know, it's all those kind of tropes, like I say, like you'd get from a kind of late 80s, early 90s kind of film, like Edward Scissorhands. So this is a retelling, it's a rejuvenation of that kind of a movie. And again, I feel like we've not seen this kind of a film in a long time. And also, it's got loads of horror tropes thrown in throughout. So if you are a horror fan, you're going to really find a lot to pick from this. It isn't just a stereotypical love film. It isn't just a film for teenagers, which is what I thought it was going to be going in. I thought it was going to be very light-hearted and kind of a bit, well, lame, if I'm honest. But I actually got a real kick out of this. It's stylishly done. It's quirky. It's funny. It's well acted. It's a bit up and down in places in terms of, like I say, its thematics and what it's trying to say, or is it trying to say something or not? But that, I guess that's kind of left for the audience interpretation. If you're a fan of Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, Little Shop of Horrors, if you're a fan of Frankenstein and you want to see it in a kind of 1980s contemporary twist, if you want to see a different kind of stylized film that is funny, kind of indie but has horror flavors, then this is the film for you. This isn't a hardcore horror fan. If you're a die-hard Frankenstein fan, please don't feel the need to see this movie. Although, you know, there are you know, elements of the Frankenstein story woven throughout, but it's a real fun story about life, coming of age, death, murder, the dark side of humanity, and all wrapped up in a kind of quirky indie bow, which I really enjoyed. I found it really refreshing, and I'd recommend this film to friends and family. But yeah, go see it. You know, if you're a hardcore horror fan, you like the gore and then you're not going to get a lot out of this film. But again, if you're a fan of those kind of horror-themed late 80s, early 90s movies that haven't been seen in a while, then you should treat yourself and go see Lisa Frankenstein. It's for me, it was a real treat. I highly recommend this movie. In terms of a late night screen review, guys, that's going to be it for a few weeks. As I say, we're going to try and find other ways to create some different kinds of content that we can kind of give you guys in the weeks where we're not doing Jack Horrorhound's House of Horrors that replace late night screen review, but we'll do as many late night screen reviews as there are horror films to view. So until next time, guys, please like, share and subscribe. Everything you do in that kind of regard really helps us, and we really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, stay safe, stay scared, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.